Moonlight flooded the small, rustic barn, the silver beams creating a stark contrast against the shadows that loomed in the corners. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of straw and earth. A soft rustling broke the stillness, the faintest sound betraying the tranquility of the night. Something stirred out there, something not meant to intrude. The weight of silence pressed upon the night, until suddenly, an unexpected sound shattered it. A clang echoed through the darkness. The farmer's heart raced as he sat upright on a stack of hay, instincts sharpening like a blade. He had always been prepared for storms, for the unpredictable whims of nature, but this felt different. Just outside the barn, muffled voices whispered through the cracks. Gritty laughter floated on the cool night air. One voice said, edged with uncertainty. That doubt ignited a fire in the farmer. He cleared his throat, but the grit and crust of dirt in the corners of his mouth reminded him to remain silent. He listened carefully, piecing together the tension, feeling it coil tighter in the pit of his stomach. Another loud thud broke through the night. The outsiders were getting bolder. Thieves, vandals, it didn't matter, they were a threat. With careful precision, the farmer reached for the tool he always kept close, a heavy iron crowbar, its weight reassuring. He had inherited this barn, this land, and he wasn't about to let anyone take that from him. The barn door creaked as he slowly approached, the cold surface sending a shiver up his spine. He knew he had the element of surprise on his side. Each step echoed softly beneath the wooden floor, a rhythm to a heart pounding in defiance. He tightened his grip on the crowbar. The scratch of metal against the skin wrapping around his fingers was the only reassurance he needed. Outside, the voices grew louder. "There's gotta be something good in here," one of the intruders said, and the farmer could imagine the greed in their eyes. He inhaled deeply, the scent of the night wrapping around him, grounding him. They would soon learn the depths of their mistake. As the door swung open, the moonlight spilled into the dark barn, illuminating the intruders, a scrappy trio clad in hoodies, eyes darting with mischief and malice. Their surprise was palpable. They hadn't expected anyone to be here. But in that split second of shock, the farmer made his move. He shouted, a voice booming low and steady. The intruders froze, eyes wide. It was a moment suspended in time, a tableau of uncertainty. They hadn't counted on a lone farmer standing in their path, armed with resolve and a crowbar. The farmer wasn't just a defender of his land. He was a guardian of a legacy that stretched through the generations. One of the intruders yelled, brandishing a flashlight. The beam flicked around the barn, illuminating the rustic tools, the pitchfork, the harnesses, the worn-out saddles. The farmer's heart raced. They were here to rob him, to strip away years of hard work with a single sweep of their hands. "Not tonight," he replied, his voice unwavering. The intruders looked at each other, sizing him up, but the farmer was resolute. Like a pendulum winding, tension built. He stepped forward, hammering a fist against the crowbar. The sound hit the air like thunder. And with that, the balance shifted. The bravado of the intruders began to waver, doubt creeping into their stance. One of them spat back, trying to reclaim the upper hand. But the farmer wasn't about to back down. He could feel the energy bubble inside him, a fierce protector rising to face the storm. Without warning, one of the thieves lunged forward, trying to swing a fist in defiance. The farmer dodged instinctively. Years of hard labor shaped his reflexes. He pulled back the crowbar, delivering it like a lightning strike, connecting solidly with the intruder's arm. A grunt of pain echoed in the barn. Fear began to infiltrate the intruder's eyes. This wasn't just a confrontation, this was survival. Someone shouted, and just like that, the tide turned. The intruders scrambled, their bravado shattering like glass. One stumbled over a bucket, sending it clattering to the floor, the sound reverberating through the barn like a distant alarm. But it was too late. They were no longer thieves. They were prey, and they bolted for the door, hurtling themselves out into the night. In that moment, the weight of victory settled on the farmer's shoulders. He wasn't just defending his property, he was protecting a piece of his soul. Gritty determination coursed through him. He stepped outside into the moonlight, still gripping the crowbar, his chest heaving in breaths that cracked the night air. He watched as the shadowy figures darted off into the distance, disappearing into the surrounding fields. His heart hadn't stopped racing, but amidst the chaos, a calmness washed over him. This land was his, a part of him ingrained in every grain of soil. With the adrenaline still surging in his veins, he turned back towards the barn, the soft glow of moonlight washing over him like a balm. Every scratch and dent in that old barn told a story of late nights, winter storms, and the sweat of hard work. He felt a surge of gratitude for the life he built, the routine he cherished, the animals that depended on him, and the stories etched in the wood. Though victorious, he knew the night would have lingering whispers. He couldn't shake the feeling that something darker lurked beyond the fields, an unsettling notion that he had to remain vigilant. Days passed, yet that night hung like a shadow over him. The incidents generalized. They had become a common occurrence in the rural community. Burglary was creeping into places where trust once thrived, as if the delicate balance between man and nature was slowly slipping away. While neighbors locked their doors tighter, the farmer tightened his resolve. He spent the next few weeks reinforcing not just the barn, but his entire property. He installed motion lights around the perimeter, their beams cutting through the darkness like guiding beacons. He replaced old locks with heavy-duty ones, bolting them shut with the same fortitude he applied to everything in life. He fortified his windows, making them not merely barriers but shields guarding the life he loved. His heart remained heavy but empowered as he moved forward. As the sun rose each morning, the colors of dawn poured over the land, painting it with vibrant life. With each dawn, he rose stronger, more resilient. A sense of purpose gripped him as he returned to his chores, turning his focus back to the animals, the crops, and to the land. With the tumult behind him, he began to inspire those around him. Friends and neighbors gathered, sharing their stories and worries, forming a tight-knit community bound by shared experiences and resolve. They rallied together, creating a network of watchfulness. Men and women stood guard, eyes peeled, ready to react. They planted community gardens and started projects to bring life back to old spaces, reinforcing bonds that stretched beyond fear and conflict. Yet beneath the surface, a shadow deepened. Was it adrenaline that clouded judgment? Or was it an instinct of fierce awareness that danger still loomed? The farmer couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to remain prepared, not just for himself, but for those he loved. As weeks turned into months, life began to regain its rhythm, but the scars of that night remained. He learned to trust his gut, to listen to the fears that spoke through the stillness. And one night, while checking on the livestock, he sensed it. The heaviness of air thickened and crackled. In the distance, he spotted movement, shadows slipping between the trees, a familiarity that sent chills racing down his spine. This time, he wasn't alone. He called for his friends, galvanizing the community into action. Together, they approached the barn, each step breathing life into a shared commitment to defend what was theirs. The night whispered secrets that only the wind understood, but their resolve held firm. When the figures finally stepped into the dim light, they realized the true depth of shadows. The same intruders, emboldened but not prepared for the unity of a community standing shoulder to shoulder, ready to protect their own. Wisdom and strength radiated from companions ready for this battle. One of the intruders shouted, incredulity lacing his voice. And in that moment, the farmer understood. This wasn't just a fight for land. It was a filament of resilience burning against the dark. As they faced the intruders, he felt a surge of empowerment. Their shared unity created a fortress against that darkness, a wall built on trust and forged through understanding. Just like that, the power flipped. The intruders, once brimming with bravado, shrank back, the fear in their eyes speaking volumes. They turned to flee, swallowing the taste of defeat. With unwavering courage, the farmer and his friends stood tall, united by purpose. Victory lit the night sky. It wasn't merely about the barn or the land, no. It was about community, love, and loyalty. The farmer knew the echoes of that night would resonate through the days to come, but hope flickered steadily in his heart. They had faced an intruder, not just against the barn, but against their very essence. Together, they protected their way of life, a testament to resilience painting the world anew. And so, the farmer returned to his barn, not with the burdens of fear, but with the knowledge that together, they could rise against the shadows, standing firm, forever prepared to embrace the dawn. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the sprawling fields. A soft rustling broke the silence, the wind whispering secrets to the tall grass. Inside the barn, the air was thick with the scent of hay and earth, a reminder of the life held within. But tonight, shadows danced uneasily across the barn floor, hinting at a disturbance lurking just beyond the wooden door. Without warning, a harsh clatter reverberated through the stillness, and the farmer's heart jolted. He sat up on a mound of hay, instinct kicking in like a well-rehearsed routine. Danger had always been just a skip away in this line of life, but he had never expected it to arrive under the cover of night with a noise like that. The farmer quickly marveled at the ease of night transforming into chaos. He had weathered storms, managed crops, and faced the unpredictable nature of life day in and day out. But this was different. Reaching for the tool tucked securely behind him, his fingers wrapped around the smooth, solid handle of a crowbar. The comfort of cold metal against his palm ignited a steady flame of determination within him. His barn, his sanctuary, felt violated before even seeing the intruders. Beyond the barn door, muffled laughter bled into the night air, punctuated by grunts of effort and the occasional scrape sounds. A knot of dread twisted in the farmer's stomach as uncertainty gnawed at his mind. Was this merely mischief, or had they come with more sinister intentions? Who were these intruders? In the breath between heartbeats, the farmer felt the air thicken a charge coursing through his veins. He stepped quietly, each movement deliberate. The silhouette of the barn's door loomed in the distance, a gaping mouth ready to swallow him whole. With a final deep breath, he threw the door open, its creaking echoing like a warning cry in the night. Under the feeble light of the moon, he could make out 3 figures hunched over a pile of his tools, carelessly strewn across the ground. Their laughter turned to startled gasps as they registered his imposing figure. One intruder exclaimed, eyes wide with shock. The farmer straightened, poised with the crowbar resting lightly against his shoulder. "You'd better get out of here." The words rolled from his mouth like thunder, low and unyielding. Even he was surprised by the calm authority that dripped from his voice. The intruders hesitated, clearly sizing him up. The biggest one, a broad-shouldered figure, snorted derisively. "You think you can scare us off with a rusted bar?" His bravado echoed empty in the night air. "Those tools are mine," the farmer replied, his gaze locking onto theirs, unwavering. Each footstep felt like a deliberate act of ownership over his land, everything he had worked for a lifetime of labor etched into the very fabric of the barn. He moved with purpose, stepping further into the light. "Just give us what we want, old man," the intruder barked, emboldened. But in that moment, fear shattered his courage. The farmer could see it flicker beneath the surface, a crack growing wider. The farmer stepped forward, muscles coiled with the tension of the moment. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." As the tension hung in the air like an unfinished note, the intruders exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping into their bravado. Then, without warning, the broad-shouldered man lunged forward, a desperate attempt to assert dominance, but the farmer had practiced this, lived this. He sidestepped fluidly, the moment stretching out like an eternity. In one swift motion, he brought the crowbar down, striking it against the intruder's foot with a penetrating clang. A cry of pain echoed in the night as the man crumpled to the ground. Fear pierced through the remaining 2 intruders like a sharp blade. "Get out," one of them shouted, his voice cracking as reality set in. Panic surged as they turned to flee, the energy shifting from bravado to frenzied retreat. But the farmer felt invigorated, the grip on his crowbar steadying. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, he followed them outside, the cool night air filled with shouts and hurried footsteps. One of the intruders yelled, sprinting towards the tree line, shadows devouring them in the distance. The farmer paused for a moment, heart racing, watching as they disappeared into the night. He had won this battle, but the war felt far from over. Days turned into weeks, but that night never quite left him. The incident haunted the corners of his mind. Maybe it was the fear that returned, gnawing at him, or perhaps the sense that they would come back. Life continued, but with it, a fog lingered, casting shadows on brighter moments. The farmer traded sleep for vigilance, eyes darting toward the barn door more than he liked to admit. Feeling the weight of a target on his back, he fortified the barn, setting up new locks and installing motion lights that pierced the shadows like arrows flying through the dark. One early evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, he felt an unmistakable presence lingering outside. His instincts kicked in early. Years of hard labor and late nights had ingrained a sense of awareness within him. Cautiously, he stepped outside, glancing at the horizon where the fields met the tree line where his foes had disappeared weeks prior. That's when he spotted it, a shadow catching the last remnants of daylight, crouching behind a few bales of hay. Fear and recognition intertwined. The same broad-shouldered man. His heart raced, not out of fear, but with a sense of indignation that burned bright like a flame. He called out, voice steady as he ventured closer, crowbar firmly in hand. The flicker of uncertainty danced in the intruder's eyes as he shifted, clearly caught off guard by the farmer's boldness. "Listen," the man stammered, trying to reclaim some semblance of dominance. "We didn't mean any harm." A part of the farmer wanted to lash out, to unleash the fury that churned within. But he took a breath. He needed to control the narrative. "You think this is some game? This is my life," he declared, words ringing with the truth of a man who had toiled relentlessly to build his world. Again, silence drew thick as a wall between them, tension hanging in the air. Something about the way the intruder shifted, eyes darting to and fro, made the farmer realize that beneath the bravado lay a nervous vulnerability. "There's nothing left for me," the man admitted quietly, voice laced with desperation. For a fleeting moment, the farmer saw a flicker of humanity in his eyes, a mirror held up to his own struggles. The farmer asked, lowering the crowbar slightly, curiosity mingling with caution. A deep breath escaped the intruder as he hesitated, glancing around as if the shadows might hold his secrets. "Lost my job, bills piling up. You know how it is. Can't sleep, can't eat." The farmer finished for him, anger bubbling anew. "You think I haven't lost things too?" Suddenly in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't just a confrontation. It was a strange convergence of two lives, two stories woven tightly by hardship. The farmer felt the urgent pulse of empathy tugging at his heart, battling against the anger he had held. Every tool, every seed in this barn, it means something. Every night spent in labor, he paused, his voice faltering just slightly. "It counts." The intruder's eyes softened, uncertainty flooding back in. The farmer leaned into the moment. "But maybe you can change that. I can't change what's happened to you, but I can offer something else." And as the sun dipped further down into the horizon, a cricket chirped its evening song. Silence fell between them, no longer filled with hostility, but a shared understanding, a reluctant connection to something greater than any one of them. Over the next few weeks, the farmer extended a hand, inviting the intruder back to the barn. Surprisingly, he accepted, and to his shock, he discovered a man willing to work hard. The barn became a space for redemption, not just for the intruder, but also for the farmer himself. Stories of struggle intertwined in the air between them, a bond forming over shared labor, laughter, and tough lessons. As days turned into seasons together, they rebuilt a different kind of life, one rooted in cooperation rather than conflict. They forged a connection that stretched beyond survival, past the fissures of despair. Together, they learned to cultivate trust. One evening, standing together beneath a vast, star-speckled sky, the farmer turned to the intruder, now a friend. "We can either live in fear or we can fight back by lifting each other up," he said, the truth evident in every word. The intruder nodded, now reborn through hard work and introspection. And in that moment, beneath the vast sky and with the moon smiling down upon them, they had built something far more valuable than possessions, something unbreakable. They found strength in unity, the kind that wrapped around them like the wind, lifting them beyond simple survival of the fittest. From that day forward, the barn transformed into a beacon of resilience, a testament to the power of community against adversity. Each tool became a symbol, not just of hard work, but of shared stories forged in both struggle and hope, connecting lives in ways that no robbery could ever break apart. The farmer had been prepared, not just for conflict, but for a change that would reverberate through the echoes of the barn, Lessons learned dancing like flickering shadows on the wooden walls, a story now etched into the very heart of their shared existence. The night wrapped itself around the old barn like a shroud, heavy and thick, the kind of darkness that breathes quietly, waiting. Inside, the weight of the day hung in the air, a palpable reminder of everything the farmer had worked for, the animals, the tools, the sweated labor that bound him to this land. But in that stillness, a strange sound sliced through the silence, a snap, and a scrape that sent a chill racing down his spine. He shot upright, heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. His instincts kicked in, honed by years of hard work and vigilance. The farmer didn't waste time asking if he should investigate. He was already moving, the heavy iron crowbar he always kept nearby resting comfortably in his hand. It was a tool, yes, but also a weapon, a declaration of readiness. As he crept toward the barn door, the rustling grew louder, more insistent. His mind raced with possibilities. Could it be the wind stirring through the hay, or something more malevolent waiting just outside? Whatever it was, he knew one thing: his peaceful nights were over. He opened the barn door slowly, aware that even the slightest creak could betray his presence. The moonlight spilled inside, illuminating the wooden beams and flickering shadows. But just beyond the threshold, something dark moved, pulling the farmer from a world of quiet into chaos. 3 figures stood silhouetted against the night, their laughter cutting through the silence like a knife. They were young, brimming with a reckless bravado that came from assuming they were untouchable. "I told you we'd find some good stuff here," one of them said, fumbling with the old tools piled haphazardly in the corner. The sight lit a fire of anger within the farmer. They had crossed a line. He shouted, his voice booming, echoing around the barn as if the very walls echoed his warning. The intruders froze, eyes wide with shock, but one of them regained his arrogance, stepping forward. "What are you gonna do about it, old man?" The farmer tightened his grip around the crowbar, the cold metal grounding him in resolve. "You don't want to find out. This barn holds everything I've built." The words hung heavy in the air. Behind him, shadows danced with the flicker of uncertainty in the intruders' eyes. For a moment, they looked unsure, their bravado faltering as the reality of their situation dawned on them. Then, like a whip cracking in the night, the largest of the intruders lunged forward, a desperate attempt to assert dominance. The farmer sidestepped, adrenaline surging. He swung the crowbar with a precision born of instinct. The metal connected solidly with the intruder's arm, a loud clang echoing in the night, followed by a grunt of pain that startled the others. The distraction was all the farmer needed. "Get out!" he shouted, voice reverberating with authority. The 2 remaining intruders turned to flee, stumbling over each other in their panic. The third, groaning on the ground, scrambled to his feet. He yelled, fear pulsing through his words as they bolted into the night, shadows swallowed by darkness. The adrenaline surged through the farmer's veins as he stepped outside. His breath came quick and fierce, mixing with the cool night air. He had defended his place, but at what cost? A few weeks later, the excitement of the struggle faded into the quiet routine of farm life, the sun rising and setting as if nothing had changed. But in reality, everything had shifted. The intruders had come and gone, but their echoes remained. His mind raced with the questions that lingered like uninvited guests. Would they return? Were they part of a larger group? The peace he fought for every day felt precarious, like a fragile egg teetering on the edge of a table. Days passed and he fortified the barn, installing stronger locks, lighting the perimeter with motion sensors and burying the shadows in light. But the fear clung stubbornly. Would it be enough? He began sleepless nights, prowling around the property, straining to hear any whisper out of place. In the silence, memories danced like phantoms. His father had taught him about hard work and vigilance, showing him how to defend what you love. But no amount of preparation could erase the worry that crept under his skin. Each snap of a twig made his heart race. Every gust of wind filled him with dread. Then came the day that would change everything. It was early evening, the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in colors of violet and gold. The farmer stood in the barn, checking on tools, running through his nightly routine, weighed down by the feeling of unease that had settled over him like a heavy fog. That's when he noticed movement shadows creeping toward the barn, figures darting between the trees. Panic surged through him as he realized they had returned. 3 uneasy shapes formed against the brightening sky, each one familiar yet twisted by the darkness. His heart raced. This time, he was not alone. He could feel the weight of his past struggles and the force of his current fears surge together. He didn't wait. Grabbing the crowbar, he burst out of the barn into the dim twilight. He called, voice strong. "I told you to leave." Thick tension hung in the air, each second stretching into eternity. For a fleeting moment, he could see their uncertainty. This was not the same bravado from before. This was fear, raw and palpable. The memory of their previous encounter thrummed in the silence. "Please, man. We just want to talk," one of them called back. It was the same broad-shouldered figure, eyes wide and panic-laden. But the farmer wasn't interested in a conversation. He had already given them that chance. "You think just because you come back, we can forget what you did?" Another intruder asked, sounding confused. "It was just a barn. We don't want trouble." It felt like a challenge, but there was a thinning veneer of desperation radiating from him. The farmer's heart warred within him, anger battling the flicker of sympathy. Here were the same faces, but their demeanor was different. They were no longer the bold thieves from before. They were now shadows of their former selves, weighed down by harsh reality. He shot back, gripping the crowbar tighter. "And why should I help?" The broad-shouldered man stepped forward cautiously. "My family is struggling. I lost my job. The bills don't stop and we don't have food. We've been hurting." He trailed off, shame written across his face. The admission hung in the air like an unspoken truth. The farmer could feel a deep stirring in his gut, a realization. Life had not been easy for him either, not for a long time. He remembered nights spent worrying about crops dying or losing livestock. The cost of living weighed heavily on his shoulders. "Everybody is struggling," the farmer said, the edge in his voice softening just a bit. "And we're desperate," the broad-shouldered man continued. "But breaking into your barn was wrong. We know that now. We didn't know how else to survive." A shift occurred in the air, and the farmer felt the tension waver. Maybe he was being called to something greater than just defending his property. Where fear had once reigned, something else was emerging, a chance for connection, for understanding. "Come inside," the farmer finally said, the decision flowing from him like a river. It was a leap into the unknown, but deep in his heart, he knew he couldn't turn his back on them. They hesitated, glancing at each other before slowly stepping forward. Together, they entered the barn, where the air was thick with the scent of hay and the old memories of hard work. The farmer asked, crossing his arms as he faced them, cautious but hopeful. "We need help," the broad-shouldered man replied, his voice almost a whisper. "We thought we could take what we needed, but it didn't help. We're tired of fighting this way, tired of the fear." The farmer studied their faces, the weariness written in their features like a story waiting to be told. He suggested, surprising himself with the words. They looked at each other incredulously. "Perhaps, but I was once a novice too." Gratitude flooded their expressions, glimmers of hope shimmering in their eyes. "We'll work hard," the broad-shouldered man insisted, determination igniting his voice. Days turned into weeks, and the barn began to fill with laughter. The farmer showed them how to mend the fences, how to plant seeds, and to tend to crops. He saw their hands grow calloused from hard work, but also watched their smiles emerge like sunrise breaking through a dark night. They sat around the fire at night, sharing food and stories of their pasts. The intruders spoke of desperation, of the bleakness that had driven them to desperate measures. The farmer learned they were fathers, brothers, and sons, just like him, each with dreams bruised by hardship. With each passing day, the weight of fear that had gripped the farmer began to fade. Instead, a bond emerged, forged in the flame of shared work, laughter echoing through the barn. What had once begun in threat turned into something pure, a family found through fire. One night, under a blanket of stars, the farmer stood outside the barn, watching the shadows of friends flicker against the walls as they prepped for the evening. "It holds so much more than just tools. It holds hope," he said quietly, almost to himself. The broad-shouldered man stepped beside him, a knowing smile brightening his face. "You saved us, you know." And as he looked out over the fields, the farmer understood. Life was not merely about defending what you had. It was also about building something greater together. This barn had transformed from a place of conflict to a sanctuary of growth. Each tool, each bit of labor now told their story, a story stitched together by hope and resilience. They had faced the darkness together and emerged into the light, stronger than they ever thought possible. It wasn't just about a farmer defending his barn. It became a testament to humanity's ability to heal, to forgive, and to uplift one another against the odds. In their union, fear dissolved, replaced with trust. They built a life together, not just surviving but thriving, proving that sometimes, in the face of adversity, understanding and compassion can mend even the deepest rips in the fabric of life. And as the seasons changed and the sun rose each day, the barn echoed with laughter, stories, and life. A beacon lighting their way forward into tomorrow, no longer haunted by the shadows of the past, but illuminated by the promise of hope. The moon hung low, casting ghostly shadows across the moonlit acres, the barn standing tall at the edge of the property like a guardian of secrets. Inside, the farmer wiped the sweat from his brow, satisfied with a long day's work. The smell of fresh hay and the distant sounds of crickets filled the air, wrapping around him in a cocoon of comfort. But that serenity shattered with a sudden noise, a sharp crash echoing through the stillness that sent a jolt through his heart. He froze, straining his ears to catch the next sound. Was it the wind? A falling branch? His gut said no. This was something darker, something intrusive. Gripping a crowbar he always kept nearby, he moved with a mix of caution and urgency. His heart raced in his chest like a storm brewing on the horizon. Peering through the barn door, he caught a glimpse of movement just outside. A dark figure hunched over, rummaging through his tools. Anger flared like fire within him. This was his land, his hard work, and he wasn't about to let anyone defile it. He yelled, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The figure whipped around, eyes wide in the shadows, revealing an unexpected fear. In that moment of confrontation, time slowed, the weight of the air hanging thick between them. The intruder hissed, scrambling backward. "I'm the owner of this place." The farmer stepped forward, crowbar in hand, a sturdy symbol of his resolve. Behind him, the shadows danced as the moonlight carved its way into the dark corners of the night. The intruder was joined by two others, their faces obscured by the night but their intentions clear. One called out, his voice shaky, a desperate plea against the growing strength of the farmer's presence. "Then leave." Each word pulsated with authority, echoing the truth. This barn was built on sweat, dreams, and sacrifice that reached back through generations. He had cultivated not just crops but a sense of belonging, a legacy. For a heartbeat, the intruders hesitated, glancing at one another as fear flickered in their eyes. It was as if they were trying to calculate their next move, deciding if this was worth the risk. Then, with a sudden rush, the largest figure lunged forward, trying to close the distance. But the farmer was ready. He sidestepped in one seamless motion, muscles tense from years of labor guiding him through this unexpected chaos. The crowbar swung with force, connecting with the intruder's leg, and the loud crack rang out across the night, followed by a grunt of pain and surprise. He shouted, falling back as the other two stumbled in their panic. The sudden shift in power made the air electric, the tension thick enough to cut. "Get out, all of you." The gravity of the farmer's words resonated in the cold night air. The three figures turned and fled, their dark shapes blurring into the shadows from which they came. Silence returned, but the echoes of their intrusion drummed in the farmer's ears. He stood there, breathing hard, crowbar still gripped tightly in his hand. The fear clung to him, an unwelcome weight pressing against his chest. But he was not just a farmhand, he was a protector of his home. As he surveyed the damage, adrenaline began to drain, leaving behind a void filled with questions. What if they returned? Would they come back with more of their kind, emboldened by their failed attempt? The unease settled deep within him, a seed of worry taking root. Over the next few weeks, the farmer threw himself into work, but the shadows of that encounter lurked in the corners of his mind. Days passed, but the incessant worry twisted into sleepless nights. He fortified the barn with fresh locks, installed a floodlight that flooded the area with brightness, and set traps around the property, a makeshift fortress for his world. But in the back of his mind, he felt an unsettling itch, a sensation that something was deeply amiss. One evening, as he stood in the barn organizing tools, he thought he heard noises, a low murmur like wind brushing through grass, but something told him it was too rhythmic to be natural. His stomach churned. Quickly, he made his way to the window. Peering out, he caught sight of movement at the edge of the field. The three figures were back, creeping like shadows. His heart raced, adrenaline surging like a tide. They were emboldened. They thought they could return. He grabbed the crowbar, the familiar heft both a comfort and a reminder of danger. His instincts kicked in. He had to protect what was his. He stepped outside, casting his silhouette against the barn's whitewashed wood, a looming figure amidst a field of uncertainty. He shouted again, firm and unwavering. The intruders paused, this time a mix of fear and defiance lurking in their eyes. "Listen, we just..." One pleaded, desperation coating his voice. "We're not here to steal." The farmer tightened his grip on the crowbar, confusion warring with instinct. "And why should I believe you?" Another voice piped up, trembling but fierce. "Nothing's been easy since the factory shut down." The confession hung in the air, heavy and raw. In that moment, reality shifted. Beneath the facade of theft and fear laid a thread of shared humanity. The farmer's heart wavered, memories flickering through his mind, times when he too had clawed his way through financial struggles, nights spent worrying about crops and horizons clouded with uncertainty. He asked, hesitantly lowering the crowbar. "A chance," the broad-shouldered man said, vulnerability twisting his features. "A chance to work, to learn. We'll help you with the farm." The farmer stared into their eyes, searching for deception but finding only the longing for hope. He considered their proposal, thoughts racing. They weren't the first to stumble in darkness, yet it was a crossroads that could lead to something unexpected. Would this be another mistake, or could it pave a way to redemption? "All right," he said finally, the word rolling off his tongue like a stone dropped into calm water. "But understand, trust must be earned. You step on this land, you work hard, or you leave." As the days turned into weeks, the barn transformed alongside the three men. They learned how to mend fences, how to plant seeds, and care for livestock. Together they toiled under the sun, the sweat of honest work washing away the shadows of that first encounter. The farmer watched as they poured their hearts into the labor, bones cracking with the effort, faces lighting up with every small victory. They shared meals around a table, swapping stories that stitched their lives together, revealing laughter where there had once been fear. "One day I want a farm of my own," the broad-shouldered man confessed one evening, the setting sun gilding the barn in golden light. "Then let's make it happen," the farmer replied, warmth threading his voice. For the first time in many seasons, laughter echoed in the barn, filling the space with bright warmth. Each day they faced the labor together, not merely as a farmer and intruders, but as companions bound in resilience. One stormy evening, as thunder rumbled in the distance, the sound of rain drumming against the roof filled the barn, wrapping them in a cocoon of safety. They huddled in front of the fireplace, the flickering flames dancing in rhythm with their conversations. "Not too long ago, things seemed dark," the farmer confessed, his voice steady despite the storm outside. "But now I see hope where I didn't." The broad-shouldered man smiled warmly. As life pressed on, the bond became undeniable. The farmer and the three former intruders became a family. They faced challenges that turned dirt into crops, and with a purpose that unified them deeper than mere survival. Together they planted dreams. Then one day, fate tested them again. News spread through the small community. A storm unlike any other was approaching. As the sky turned dark, foreboding clouds rolled in, a feeling of heaviness flooding the air. The farmer gathered everyone in the barn, sharing his concerns, knowing that they would need every ounce of strength to prepare for what was to come. "Tomorrow's storm will be fierce," he warned, the weight of his voice serious. "We need to secure the livestock, cover the seeds, tie everything down." They sprang into action, scurrying around the barn, securing items, preparing for the worst. The rain began to fall, softly at first, then it intensified, a relentless pounding that filled the space with unyielding ferocity. By the time darkness cloaked the sky, fury and fear danced in the air like restless ghosts. Hours passed, the storm raging outside, but inside they drew strength from one another. The farmer could feel the bond enveloping them, a tether forged in trust, creating layers of protection that transcended just physical walls. As the storm roared, knocking at the walls of their sanctuary, the farmer realized they were not merely surviving. They had forged a resilient community. They faced the storm together, laughter piercing through the chaos as they shared stories around flickering candles. But then, without warning, the power of nature lashed out with a deafening crash. A massive tree, uprooted by the winds, collided with the barn, sending debris crashing down. Panic erupted in the dim light, chaos spilling over as they scrambled to assess the damage. The farmer shouted, his heart hammering in his chest. The broad-shouldered man answered, his urgency cutting through the fear. With adrenaline surging through their veins, they worked quickly, guiding the animals out of the chaos into the relative safety of the stormy night. Working side by side, they moved swiftly, dodging falling debris, each moment intertwined with the pulse of their shared purpose. By the time the storm subsided, dawn broke against the wreckage, revealing a battered barn, but more importantly, the four of them stood together, hearts steadying. They had faced both intruders and nature, but together they emerged strong, not unscathed, but unbroken. As the sun peeked through remnants of clouds, the farmer gathered them together in the morning light. "This was more than a storm," he said, voice filled with conviction. "It showed us the depths of our bond. This barn, this land, is not just an ending, it's a beginning." And in that moment, beneath the rising sun and amidst the whispers of the wind, they knew they were bound not just by struggle, but by hope, a tapestry woven through resilience, trust, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. From that day forward, the barn transformed into a beacon, a place not just of work, but of love, laughter, and unfathomable strength. A sacred space reclaiming its purpose, echoing the journeys they had taken, the battles they had fought together, all under the sheltering arms of a community born from adversity. In each nail driven into fresh wood, in every seed sown back into the earth, they found the essence of life itself, connections that fortify against storms, an unbreakable spirit of unity amidst chaos, and a future built on shared dreams and unyielding hope. The cold moonlight streamed through the cracks in the old wooden barn, illuminating dust motes dancing in the still night air. Inside, the familiar sounds of the farm went quiet, interrupted only by the low snorts of the horses and the rhythmic patter of 100 crickets outside. But then, a noise shattered the peace, a sudden crash that reverberated through the structure, like an alarm bell ringing in the dead of night. The farmer's heart raced, instinct kicking in like it always did when something was off. He sat up, wiping the sweat from his brow, the heat of the day still lingering in his bones. Was it the wind, or worse, a person? He felt a chill run down his spine as he glanced over at the corner where he kept his tools. His trusted crowbar lay gleaming under the faint moonlight. With a firm grip, he grabbed it and moved toward the barn door, heart pounding like a war drum. He knew this land like the back of his hand, every creak of wood and every breath of wind. But this felt different. The air was thick with tension, urging him forward as he gently eased the door open. What awaited him outside sent adrenaline coursing through his veins. 3 figures crouched just outside the barn, their silhouettes barely outlined against the darkness. They were rifling through his tools, tossing aside the pitchforks and spades like confetti. He shouted, his voice cutting through the night, deep and commanding. The figures froze, glancing at one another, a mixture of surprise and defiance in their eyes. He stepped further into the light. "Chill, man." One of them spat, his bravado shaky against the steel of the farmer's presence. The man was young, probably in his early 20s, but even in that moment, he exuded a desperate kind of arrogance that triggered something primal in the farmer's gut. "This is my barn." He took a step forward, crowbar held steady at his side, a symbol of his resolve. The intruders shifted, glancing around as panic began to creep its way into their expressions. The largest of the trio barked, attempting to mask his uncertainty. He stepped forward, trying to reclaim the power of the moment. But the farmer wasn't backing down. The words rolled off his tongue with the gravity of a warning. The shadows of the barn felt like they were closing in, the stakes of the situation layered upon layers of hard-earned trust and vulnerability. And then it happened. The largest intruder lunged forward, fueled by defiance. The farmer reacted instinctively, sidestepping the lunge as if he had practiced this dance a million times. With swift precision, he swung the crowbar, connecting solidly with the man's arm. A crack echoed through the night, followed by a howl of pain as the intruder stumbled back, clutching his limb. One of the others screamed and they turned to run, lunging back into the darkness from which they came. The farmer stood rooted, watching them disappear into the night, heart pounding, crowbar still clutched in hand. He had done it. He had defended what was his. But a cold weight settled in his stomach. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a reminder that the world outside had become dangerous. As the echoes of the struggle faded, he realized it wasn't just his barn they had violated. They had breached his sense of safety, and that realization clawed at him like a persistent shadow. A few nights passed, but the unease clung to him, an unwelcome guest sleeping in the corners of his mind. He bolted the barn doors with renewed vigor, added heavy-duty locks, and installed motion sensor lights that flickered with every rustle of the grass outside. Every creak of the old barn timber sent chills racing down his spine. Yet, amidst all the preparation, a gnawing worry lingered. Would they come back? Would the next time be worse? The thought spun in a cycle, a haunting echo that bred insomnia. Then it happened again one fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly across the fields. The farmer finished his chores, exhaustion settling into his bones when he heard it, a low whisper, a sound too cautious to be the wind. It drifted through the barn, prickling the back of his neck. His heart raced as he peered through the cracks of his weathered wood. 3 dark figures, the same ones. His grip tightened around the crowbar, pulse quickening with determination. They were back, emboldened and desperate, as if they knew they could take what they wanted. But not tonight. He shouted, voice booming, echoing through the stillness. The figures froze, confusion and fear flashed across their faces. One of them cried out, voice trembling. He shot back, anger bubbling beneath the surface. It wasn't just his tools they were after, it was his peace of mind. The broad-shouldered man pleaded, hands clenched tightly at his sides. I lost my job. Something flickered in the farmer's heart, a pulsing wave of empathy tempered by caution. He thought of the countless times he felt that same gnawing fear, the struggle to make ends meet, the feeling of being purely human. He asked, lowering the crowbar just a fraction, cautious yet curious. We just want a chance to help. If you give us a shot, we can work for you, just. The words slipped into the night, steeped in desperation. The farmer hesitated, his mind racing with possibilities. He could feel the weight of their lives hanging in the balance. Would he find himself giving in to an idealistic dream of redemption, or finding himself merely a victim once more? All right, he said finally, surprising even himself. But understand, trust has to be earned. You step onto this land, you obey my rules, or you leave. They nodded, relief washing over them like a wave, but the farmer felt the tension linger, a knot still tightly bound in his gut. Days turned into weeks. The barn, once a place fraught with tension, turned into a workshop of resilience. The intruders, now workers, dove into their tasks with surprising commitment. They mended fences, cared for the animals, and learned the rhythm of farm life. But beyond the physicality of work, something deeper began to form a bond. Shared meals turned into conversations that echoed against the wood walls. They shared laughter, stories of struggle, dreams yet unfulfilled. One evening, under a blanket of stars, they gathered around a fire outside the barn. The farmer found himself immersed in their stories, lives filled with rejection and loss, but also dreams of a better tomorrow. I just want a chance to prove myself, the broad-shouldered man admitted, eyes reflecting the flickering flames. The farmer nodded. We all have our battles. As days turned into months, the boundaries blurred between farmer and workers. They grew into a family forged through shared labor, trust, and commitment. The barn housed dreams anew, even as it weathered storms in both tangible and emotional ways. Despite the growth that unfolded, doubts occasionally intruded. The farmer remained vigilant, glancing over his shoulder at shadows on the horizon, memories of that first intrusion lingering like a stubborn ghost. Then one morning came the weather report. There was a storm brewing, the worst of the season. Dark clouds rolled in ominously, casting a pall over the farm. The farmer gathered everyone in the barn, urgency rippling through his words. "We have to prepare. This storm won't be like anything we've faced before. We need to secure everything." As they scrambled to reinforce the barn, the wind outside began to howl, racing through the fields like a wild beast, threatening to tear apart everything they had built. The energy in the barn shifted, their frantic movements mirroring the chaos brewing outside. Drumming rain began to pelt against the roof, a reminder of nature's sheer power. The storm raged on, windows rattling, yet amidst the chaos, the farmer felt an odd sense of calm. Standing shoulder to shoulder with these once strangers, he felt something deeper, a shared purpose forged through adversity. Then, without warning, a deafening crack split the night. It shook the foundations of the barn like an earthquake. One of the workers shouted, panic flaring in his eyes, "Keep calm." The farmer bellowed, gathering a sense of command against the rising tide of fear. Together, they braved the tempest, stepping outside into the storm. The sight that greeted them sent heart-stopping terror coursing through their veins. A massive tree had fallen, its trunk smashing against the barn's side, creating a gaping hole, exposing their sanctuary to the elements. The farmer shouted through the roar of the wind, urgency propelling them into action. In a flurry of movement, they worked together, guiding the terrified animals away from the chaos, their hearts racing against the clock. The storm was a beast, tearing apart the world around them, but they fought against it as a unit, forged in the fires of desperation. Hours passed, the storm howling outside, but the barn became a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. Finally, after relentless labor, they managed to secure everything as best they could. The farmer gathered them inside, checking for injuries, seeing the strain etched on their faces, but relief washed over him. They were all safe. "We did it together," he stated, voice steady amidst exhaustion. As dawn broke, the wind subsided, casting light upon a battered landscape. The barn stood, worn but unbroken. They stared at the ruins left behind, a reminder of the storm but also of their unity, the bond that had formed through struggle. In the weeks that followed, they rebuilt, not just the barn but an entire way of life rooted in resilience. They stood shoulder to shoulder, each nail driven into wood, each seed planted in soil, reminding them that there was strength in unity. The farmer often reflected on the night those intruders first entered his barn. The fear that gripped him then seemed so distant now. They had crossed a line back then, but they had also created something larger, weaving the fabric of trust through hard work and determination. So, as seasons changed and the barn began to fill with laughter again, it held more than just the essence of farm life. It echoed with the promise of new beginnings, with friendships carved from shared journeys and the strength to face whatever else this world might throw at them. In that barn, they learned that life is not just about defending what is yours, but about creating connections that hold strong against the winds of change. And as they settled into the warmth of unity, the farmer knew they would face whatever came their way, together. It wasn't just a barn that stood tall. It was a testament to endurance, to the power of community, and to finding light even in the darkest places. The shrill cry of a crow pierced through the stillness of the early morning, breaking the first light of dawn. In the quiet of the countryside, a barn stood as the fortress of a hardworking farmer. Inside, tools hung neatly on the walls, each one holding stories of long days spent in the fields, sweat soaking through shirts, labor woven into the fabric of life. But as the sun slowly illuminated the barn, casting long shadows across the dirt floor, something began to stir that would change everything. A sudden crash echoed through the air, jolting the farmer upright. He had designed his life to be predictable days filled with routine, nights spent in tranquil sleep. But this disruption sent a surge of fear racing through him. The darkness outside was still clinging, and he felt the weight of something lurking. With a steady hand, he reached for the crowbar he kept nearby. It was more than just a tool. It was a symbol of his readiness, a promise he made to himself that he would protect what was his. He tiptoed toward the barn door, pressing an ear against the weathered wood. Silence enveloped him like a heavy cloak, but then came the unmistakable sound of rustling, a whisper of movement just outside. Those sounds were too deliberate, too calculated. The farmer opened the door a crack, peering out cautiously. What he saw sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through his veins. 3 figures stood, shadows against the mottled backdrop of morning. They were hunched over, rifling through his tools with a reckless abandon that left the farmer's heart pounding in anger. He shouted, his voice booming across the stillness, firm and unyielding. The figures froze momentarily, startled, before turning to face him with wide eyes. Recognition flickered in their gazes, but he saw hesitation too. They clearly hadn't thought anyone would be there. One of them shouted back, a nervous edge in his voice, looking for something. The realization that these intruders could ruin everything filled him with a fierce determination. He stepped forward, crowbar swinging lightly at his side, an unspoken warning that he intended to be formidable. The tallest of the intruders tried to regain control of the situation. "We don't want trouble. You think you can just take what you want? Not on my watch," the farmer growled, the weight of his resolve filled with years of hard-earned trust and labor. In an instant, chaos erupted. The tallest figure lunged at him, fueled by a mix of bravado and desperation. The farmer sidestepped just in time, muscles reacting instinctively from years of work. With a swift motion, he raised the crowbar and struck with intent. It connected with a satisfying thud against the intruder's arm, and a surprised shout rang out. "Let's go!" Another shouted, panic flashing across their faces as they turned to flee. The farmer stood firm, eyes locked on them, driven by a fierce pride for what was his. He watched as they scrambled away, their breaths heavy with fear, confidence teetering on the edge of his unyielding presence. As the last figure dashed into the trees, the farmer leaned against the barn door, heart pounding, breath coming in quick succession. He had warded off intruders, but self-doubt gnawed at him. Had he done enough? More importantly, would they return? The days that followed were a blur of anxiety mixed with resolve. Each night he lay in bed, listening intently for any sign of trouble, half expecting the shadows to come creeping back. The world outside slowly turned from winter to spring, flowers blossoming and trees bursting with new life. But in the farmer's mind, those weeks of unease turned into a storm of their own. He fortified the barn, replacing old locks and hanging motion sensor lights that flared to life at the slightest disturbance. Yet as April showers fell, so did the sense of calm. Each crash of thunder outside echoed his own fears. Would they return? Were they watching him, waiting for the right opportunity to strike? Shadows lengthened across the barn floor, mirroring the growing darkness in the corners of his mind. Then, late one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he heard it again. The telltale rustle, a whisper of trouble lurking at the edge of the fields. His heart raced as he grabbed the crowbar, knowing he had to confront the reality of the night. Fear gripped him, wrestling with the hardened resolve that had defended his home before. He stepped cautiously outside, muscles tensing as he surveyed the area. Looming figures flickered near the barn, 3 familiar shapes creeping closer with furtive movements. Right there, beneath the moonlight, his instincts screamed for action. "Get off my property," he boomed, voice echoing like thunder across the stillness. They turned to face him, panic tightening their expressions. One cried, desperation threading through his voice. "You think I'll trust you again?" The farmer's voice was steady, but doubt began to creep underneath his anger. He could see the desperation in their eyes, a familiar struggle echoed in the hollow cheeks of the broad-shouldered man who had lunged at him before. The same man pleaded, stepping forward cautiously. "We're not here to steal. I lost my job. My family is struggling." In that fraught moment, vulnerability washed over the fear. The farmer, who had spent countless hours working to keep his own family afloat, recognized the desperation woven into the intruder's plea. Long nights, cold winters, empty stomachs, it brought a tightness in his throat. "Because we want to work," the man continued, his voice low but fierce. "We want to earn what we need." For a moment, time curdled. The farmer's heart raced as he fought against his instincts, grappling with a decision that felt monumental. He could turn them away, bolster his defenses, or he could extend a hand into the dark and see what might rise from it. "All right," he said finally, the words surprising even himself. "But understand this, you step on my land, you follow my rules. Trust has to be earned." Relief washed over their faces, a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. They nodded, albeit nervously, and a flicker of hope sparked amidst their desperation. The following days unfolded into a whirlwind of unexpected labor. The barn, once the site of tension and conflict, transformed into a place of teamwork. The farmer taught them about planting, about caring for livestock, about life that thrived on hard work and dedication. They were quick learners, eager to prove they were worth the second chance. Each sunrise brought the sound of laughter mingling with the work of the day, a melody of hammers pounding against nails, soil turned over by calloused hands, and voices raised in camaraderie. Yet, there were moments riddled with doubt, times when the farmer caught himself glancing back into the shadows, half expecting the intruders to slip back into the night. He watched as they toiled under the sun, sweat dripping from their brows, and wondered if it would all fall apart again, a risk of trust that felt precarious on the precipice of hope. One evening, as they sat around a fire outside the barn, the farmer found himself lost in their stories. The tall one spoke of lost jobs, the shattered dreams of his family, and the seemingly endless cycle of despair. "I just want to stand on my own 2 feet again," he admitted, voice heavy with longing. "Everyone makes mistakes," the farmer replied, his heart swelling with empathy. As weeks turned into months, they forged not only a business partnership but a family bound through shared struggles. The barn buzzed with activity, filled with the scent of fresh hay and the sound of voices that had once been filled with conflict but now sang with laughter. Then the storm hit. The sky darkened, heavy with rain clouds that rolled in like a freight train. The weather forecast had warned of the impending storm, but nothing could prepare the farmer for the intensity of nature's fury. He gathered the others in the barn, urgency weaving through their actions as they secured tools and locked the doors against the raging winds. Rain began to pelt against the structure, drowning out the world outside, a deep rumble reverberating through the ground. The farmer shouted, directing them through the chaos. The tension rose, the barn creaking ominously around them, but together they moved with determination, a well-oiled machine fueled by adrenaline. As the storm raged on, the group found themselves huddled together, the weight of the storm bearing down on the roof above. They shared stories, laughter punctuating the tension, creating a warmth that seeped into every corner. They revealed their fears, hopes, and dreams in the flickering glow of lantern light that cast a cozy aura against the dark. But just as the storm reached its peak, a deafening crack split the night, a sound so loud it shook the barn foundations. Terror ripped through them as they exchanged alarmed glances. In that instant of chaos, the farmer's heart sank. Had nature come to reclaim what was theirs? He yelled, racing towards the door as the wind screamed and rain lashed against his face. He fought against the tempest as he stepped outside, trying to assess the damage that had just happened. What he saw made his heart race. One of the largest trees had toppled, crashing against the barn, sending debris crashing down, blocking the entrance entirely. He shouted, urgency surging through his veins. They worked furiously together, fighting against the wind and rain, fear and determination propelling them forward. They fought to save every animal, every precious life as the storm raged around them. Finally, after what felt like hours, they managed to guide the last frightened beast to safety. Soaked, battered, and winded, they scrambled back into the barn, adrenaline coursing through them. The farmer asked, scanning the room. They nodded, showing signs of relief as the storm gradually began to abate. They stood together, chest heavy but hearts filled with hope against the odds. They had stood together against the storm and emerged unbroken. Days turned into weeks as they rebuilt the barn, working side by side in the dawn of a new understanding. Amid a backdrop of hardship, they forged a bond deeper than blood. Each nail hammered into fresh wood became a testament to resilience, each seed planted in renewed soil a symbol of hope. As the barn began to regain its strength, so did their spirits. Eventually, laughter filled the bright, sunny days as they thrived against the landscape, turning the pain of loss into the promise of tomorrow. The farmer often thought about that first confrontation, how quickly fear had turned into a chance for growth. It resonated with him now that life, with all its struggles, was just like the changing seasons, a cycle of loss and renewal, both essential in crafting something meaningful. At the heart of it all was not just the barn or the land, but the lessons it held, the power of resilience, the strength found in community, and the beauty of life cultivated through shared experiences. Together, they had faced the worst and found a way through, transformed from strangers into a family, united through the trials that had once threatened to tear them apart. And as the sun set over the fields, casting a golden hue over the barn, the farmer understood that it wasn't just about protecting what was his. It was about building something greater, a legacy woven through care, trust, and the unshakable belief that together, anything was possible. The sound shattered the peaceful stillness of the night, a loud crash followed by the unmistakable clatter of tools hitting the barn floor. It pierced through the quiet air like a knife, waking the farmer from a deep sleep. His heart pounded in his chest as he sat upright, the moonlight spilling through the cracks in the wooden walls like shards of glass. Panic surged through him. Who could be in his barn at this hour? He reached instinctively for the crowbar he kept by his bed. It felt heavy and solid in his grip, a reassuring weight that grounded him in the chaos of his thoughts. He slipped out of bed, heart racing, moving silently toward the door. Peering through the cracks in the barn door, he squinted into the darkness. Outside, shadows danced under the faint light of the moon, and three figures were huddled together, rummaging through his tools as if they owned the place. Anger bubbled within him, but he forced himself to think. He bellowed, voice echoing into the night. The figures froze for a moment, their heads snapping up. He could see their hesitant eyes glancing around, sizing him up, gauging their escape options. One of them shouted back, bravado laced with fear, "Stuff, this is my land." He took a step forward, crowbar held tightly in hand, every muscle in his body coiled with anticipation. He was ready to fight for everything he held dear. Suddenly, the tallest of the intruders lunged at him, fueled by desperation. In that split second, instinct took over. The farmer sidestepped, muscles working as if they had been trained for this very moment. With a swift swing, the crowbar connected with the intruder's arm, a sharp crack echoing through the barn. A pained yelp pierced the night, and the intruder fell back, clutching his arm. One of the others shouted, fear scrambling their earlier bravado. They turned to flee, scrambling backward as the farmer moved in closer. He roared, his voice deep and steady. The shadows turned and fled into the darkness, hearts pounding with the thrill of victory, a victory he had not asked for but was forced to claim. Breathing heavily, the farmer leaned against the barn door, heart racing. Tremors of adrenaline surged through him, banishing the last remnants of sleep. He watched the figures melt into the night, a firm resolve settling in his gut. But as the quiet returned, dread crept in. What if they returned? Would they come back with more people, emboldened by fear and vengeance? He felt the stirrings of something dark and unsettling. Days turned into weeks, and the memory haunted him like a shadow that wouldn't let go. He fortified the barn, replacing locks and installing brighter lights that flooded the yard with illumination. But that creeping sense of unease clung to him day and night. Every creak of the barn settling felt amplified. Each whistle of the wind sent shivers down his spine. He began pacing the fields, a guardian on high alert, straining to catch any errant sound that signaled trouble. The thrill of the chase hung over him, and soon the thrill turned to exhaustion. One particularly cool evening, the world outside lay shrouded in heavy mist, cloaking everything in a blanket of silver and gray. The farmer was in the barn, double-checking his equipment when he heard it again, a crunch of footsteps on gravel. Alarm bells went off in his mind. He reached for the crowbar, heart hammering in his chest as he opened the door, peering into the gloom. Three silhouettes stood at the edge of his property, the same ones. He could see their shapes, familiar yet framed by darkness, hesitation replacing the brashness they'd exhibited before. They were clearly unsure of themselves, glancing around nervously as if the grass beneath their feet threatened to swallow them whole. The farmer shouted, voice taut with authority. One of them, the broad-shouldered man from before, held his hands up in a placating gesture. "Wait, we're not here to cause trouble this time. The farmer's brow furrowed, skepticism coating his voice. The man's voice grew desperate. "We were just looking for tools, a way to get by. But things have gotten worse out there." The farmer's heart wavered. He thought of how difficult life could be, of sleepless nights and bills piling up. "Just give us a chance," another intruder pleaded, voice shaky but resolute. "We'll work for you." A part of the farmer wanted to turn them away, to slam the door shut and lock it tight, but deep down he knew something was different this time. He caught a flicker of sincerity in their eyes, a shared understanding that transcended their past conflict. "Fine," he said finally, his voice steady despite the apprehension weighing on him. "You're going to help around here, but you'll follow my rules." Relief flooded their faces as they nodded, the tension releasing in that small moment of agreement. The farmer knew he was taking a risk, but it was one born from understanding that everyone deserves a chance, even the lost and desperate. The next few weeks turned into a whirlwind of activity. The barn transformed from a place of conflict into a hub of toil and purpose. The intruders, now workers, learned the intricacies of farm life. The farmer taught them how to mend fences, plant seeds, and tend to the livestock. They labored alongside him, laughter slowly replacing the heavy tension that had filled the air. As they worked, stories flowed, tales of loss, despair, and dreams deferred. Each worker bared their vulnerabilities, and the farmer found himself relating to the struggles they shared. There was a bond forming, one rooted in resilience and shared hardship. But amid this newfound camaraderie, shadows still lurked. The farmer kept the crowbar nearby, tension in the back of his mind. What if their past wasn't behind them? What if they were only waiting for the moment to strike again? And then disaster struck. One evening, dark clouds rolled over the horizon, bringing heavy rain that poured down in sheets. The farmer scurried about, checking on the animals and securing loose tools around the barn. Just when he thought the storm would pass quietly, a deafening crack of thunder erupted overhead, rattling the very foundations beneath his feet. He yelled, urgency ringing in his voice. The workers sprang into action, adrenaline coursing through their veins. They fought against the elements, moving quickly to protect the livestock. Huddled in the barn, they worked together frantically, trying to shield each other and the animals from the onslaught of wind and rain. But just as they thought they had everything secured, a fierce gust of wind slammed against the barn door, rattling their resolve. The farmer shouted, scanning the group. One of the workers replied, urgency creeping into his voice as he glanced nervously at the rain pounding out a chaotic rhythm. Then it happened. A blinding flash of lightning illuminated the barn, followed by the sound of a massive tree crashing down somewhere nearby. Panic surged through the group, and in that instant they knew they had to brace for impact. The wind howled through the barn, rattling windows and causing the timber to creak ominously. With every breath, the tension grew thicker, a knot of anxiety settling into their stomachs. As the storm lashed against them, the farmer shouted commands, directing the workers to help steady the barn as it rocked with the force of nature. They were no longer just a group of people. They were a united front against the tempest swirling around them. In those moments, they shared jokes between bursts of thunder, laughter breaking through the fear. Each one of them was there fighting together, proving the strength of teamwork, the power of solidarity in the face of chaos. But just when they began to glimpse a sense of victory, another ear-splitting crack shook through the barn, and a large beam above them began to splinter. "Get out!" The farmer yelled, urgency bubbling into panic. They bolted for the door, but the wind surged, slamming it shut, reinforcing the danger that surrounded them. As debris began to fall, the farmer felt a surge of desperation. The beam creaked and fell, sending shards of wood crashing down around them, splinters flying. He grabbed a nearby worker and pulled them to safety just as more debris landed where they had been standing. In that moment, everything shifted. He could see their fear reflected back in their eyes, yet there was also something else, an unbreakable spirit ignited in the depth of their struggle. But just then, as they huddled in the corner, the roof above them began to buckle, and a slow realization hit the farmer like a sledgehammer. He yelled, adrenaline surging. As they moved to escape, more beams fell through the air, and the storm outside roared like a beast unleashed. Just as they finally opened the door and bolted through the gap, he felt something shift behind him, a massive section of wood breaking loose. He turned back just in time to see the beam crashing down toward him. In that split second, thoughts raced through his mind, a lightning-fast evaluation of all he held dear, the ground beneath him shaking with the power of the storm. And then darkness enveloped him, a world swallowed whole by chaos. The shouts of his companions faded as he felt himself falling into the abyss. As the dust settled, the storm raged outside, rain slashing down in a relentless torrent. In the aftermath, the barn stood battered and broken, but deep within, it hid the echoes of shared laughter, fear, and an unbreakable bond forged through fire and resilience. As the distant rumble of thunder rolled into silence, no one knew what was to come next. Would they return to safety together, or would something lingering in the shadows await them, ready to claim what was left? The answers rested in the wake of destruction, hanging heavy like the mist rising over the fields, a reckoning echoing in the heart of the farmer, and for those who dared to face the darkness with him.